What's up, guys? I'm back. I wanted to talk a bit today about something that I've talked a lot about in the past concerning NASCAR games, but I thought I would try to get into a little more detail about this specific area of these games, or the lack thereof, and that's presentation. I think there's a lot of people who don't really understand what presentation really is. Uh, they probably feel like it's just throwing in some cutscenes and calling it a day. Presentation is a lot more than just, a couple of cutscenes here and there. Practically everything you're looking at within the game, in some small way, is part of presentation. It's the way the game is presented to you, so to speak. So when you're playing the game, what you're looking at, how it's laid out, how everything ties together, what happens, uh, what ties everything together. All of that is presentation. And it's the one thing, in my opinion, the single biggest problem we've had when it comes to development of NASCAR games. These games are lacking in presentation more than anything else. There's always something that people are like, hey, man, why is this missing? Why is that missing? And it's legitimate. It's all, a real thing. But for me, if there was one thing that I think was the biggest issue, to me it is the presentation, the lack of it. We've had these games coming out. I don't include EA Sports because for me that was a complete other generation. But I do include Utechnics and from 2011 till now. And we now have 8 different games since that started in 2011, and there's still a glaring lack of presentation. Nothing really happens in between races. There's not much pre-race or post-race at all. Utechnics, they kind of had a little more than 704. I think with the 2015 release, you did have some of the flyover, the fireworks, in depending on what track you were at. But they didn't go as deep with it as like NASCAR Thunder 2004, which is way back in the day, where they would actually go down the entire lineup on the warm up lap, uh, and you would hear the commentator really talking more about it, and sometimes even include you. Those things are completely missing, and it really affects the game. And this is the reason why you walk away feeling like these games are bare bones, because nothing happens. It's all about just the actual race, and not much else. Now, they have made improvements, and uh, I've complimented 704. These games are better every year. There's no denying that. Uh, but for me, the level of improvements are just not enough. Okay, and the fact is, if it was big, innovative features we're talking about, I would be a lot more sympathetic. But we are talking mostly about things we used to get 15 years ago, and presentation is not something that I consider revolutionary. Presentation is a part of most games, and let's just break it down to sports games, right? I've talked a lot about the NBA 2K series and MLB The Show, and even to an extent Madden Football. So I know a lot of these titles have fallen off throughout the years, but that's inevitable. That's what happens with yearly games, especially yearly sports games, because there is a limit to what you can do to keep these games feeling fresh. Other than updating rosters, and in the case of NASCAR games, The only thing we seem to get are updated rosters and paint schemes. That's not enough to keep people excited about these games on a yearly basis. That being said, I understand why they're doing yearly releases. I don't agree with it. Personally, I wouldn't do it that way. I think releasing a sports game once every 3 years gives you enough time to focus and on really improving these games where they really feel like a big leap above the last game, working on new features and really improving the game. But that's not realistic, especially when it comes to a company like 704, because this is their bread and butter. They don't make other games. This is it. They jumped in with 2 feet. They decided we're just going to make NASCAR games. That's it. And now they have a license going for another 10 years. They can't survive as a company unless they release a game every year. They got to milk it for all it's worth. So I do understand why they're doing it. I just feel like it's a recipe for long-term failure. It's just, I think it's impossible for them. I don't see them another 10 years making NASCAR games and still sustaining a profitable business model. I don't know, man. I mean, right now, it's fine because this game has so much room for improvement that you actually can improve these games every year up to a point, and you can legitimately, have people buy the game and say, yeah, this was better than the last game, and it's getting better. The problem is that at some point, people expect a fully fleshed out product, which we haven't gotten yet, in my opinion. And NASCAR Heat 3 was a decent game. It was pretty good. I gave it a really good review, but it still falls short in many ways. And I did grade it on a curve, right? Meaning that I was pretty much looking at it as compared to recent games, and legitimately it is better and it is improving. I can't really knock the game overall. It's a pretty decent game, but there's so much room for improvement. Things I've talked about. I've already talked a lot about these things, but I'm only going to bring up a few things concerning presentation because, like I said, I really believe that's the biggest area that needs improvement and needs work. Everything in the game, of course, needs work. We know that the physics, the handling, the AI I've talked a lot about, those things have to be improved every year. That goes without saying. That's why I don't focus too much on talking about that because I do expect them to work on that stuff every year. You can't just release the next game and just leave that alone. That is a work in progress every year. It's never going to be perfect. And I've given them some credit. I'm still playing the game today, which is a very big positive for them because, you know, the previous game, I stopped playing it after a while. So this game has a lot more replay value. And the reason for that is, and I think one of the biggest things they did, which was a good thing, was the increasing the competitiveness of the AI. I have my issues with the AI. They don't spread out. Uh, they don't run really a lot of different lines. The tire model is not good. So there's a lot of issues that definitely need serious work. However, in all fairness, they are competitive. They run very much improved lap times. You don't blow by these guys the way you did in previous years. And even when you're using custom setups, most races are still competitive, right? There are some tracks here and there that are a bit too easy, but these are things I do expect them to continue to work on and tweak. But for the most part, I am happy with the competitiveness of the AI, and I'm still having enough enjoyment with the actual races that I'm still playing it today. So that is, in all fairness, a very big positive for 704. For years, you guys know I've been complaining about how easy these games are and how there's no sense of accomplishment. Because you're blowing by the field and just winning these races with your eyes closed. You didn't even need a custom setup. Now at the top settings, you know, you do need custom setups if you want to win. And even now, I do not win consistently. Um, Sometimes it's frustrating because it's things that I don't like about the game, like these late cautions, the tire model. You end up taking four tires and you still get beat. There's still bad things about it, but there's also good things. And when I do win, it feels awesome. It really feels like I fucking earned it. So I think they deserve credit because the competitiveness of the AI is one of their biggest improvements, right? But still, at the end of the day, the game is still an exercise of the actual race. So you're really going from one race to the next, and nothing happens off track or in between, outside of the new ownership mode, which I love that they implemented it. But once again, it's one of those baby first steps because there's still so much more that you need to do to make it more deeper and more immersive. So and also there's still a huge lack of presentation even with the ownership. You know, outside of looking at the cars in the garage and you're just basically clicking on certain uh, things and then that's it. Then you go to the race. It's not deep or immersive. So they really do need to come really strong with that and show us what they can do with it. But the lack of presentation is evident. Um, Nothing happens between races, like I said. Now, I'm going to talk about something I have mentioned before, but I'm going to try to get into a little more detail just to try to visualize what I'm talking about. Yeah, I would. How awesome would it be that when you go to practice? First of all, this is a big problem that I've talked about. That there's a big disconnect with people, most people, casual fans, or even hardcore fans like myself, who are not engineers, don't really fucking fully understand all the intricacies of setting up a race car for race day. So when you go to practice, I think most people, there's a handful of people out there who understand it, and that's fine. They can work on their own car and they come up with something. But the rest of us, we end up going online and just using somebody's setup. There's no sense of accomplishment doing that. You don't really learn anything, and it's still a compromise because even though these custom setups clearly make you a lot faster, they're not really suited to every individual person because yeah, you're using someone else's setup. I just hate the disconnect of it. I hate the lack of involvement. And this is the reason these games feel the way they do. And they're lacking in these areas. And that's to me what's holding these guys back and what's hurting these games. So what I would do, what I've suggested, I talked about things like an automatic crew chief, somebody that you can interact with in game in your career mode, right? There's no one you really interact with in these games except for at the beginning of the year, you decide if you're going to sign with somebody or if you're going to still be an owner, or when you go from one series to the next. There's very little interaction with specific people, but really what makes other sports titles deeper and more immersive is the presentation. This is why I talk so much about like NBA 2K and even MLB The Show, because those games are not just about what happens on the field or the court. It's about what happens off of that, in between games. You still deal with an agent, you deal with your manager or the coach, you deal with the owners, you deal with sponsors. There's commercial endorsements, interviews, everything you do off track, off court, off the field, uh, it actually affects your career. It's all linked together. That's called presentation. And it's not just cobbling together a couple of cutscenes and throwing them in there. It has to be cohesive. It has to, everything has to link together. In the NBA 2K series, when you first start your career, okay, you're drafted into the league. And there's a lot that goes on as your rookie season is different from as you become a veteran. You communicate with ownership. If you want to trade, if you want, there's certain things you want in your career. Okay? You have to interact with people off the court, right? Of course, the actual gameplay has to be great. We know that. That goes without saying. That's why I'm not really focused on talking about physics, handling, and even the AI. I'm talking about off-track shit. Everything that happens throughout the game that should make you feel like you're a real driver in the sport of NASCAR. The things they experience, you should be experiencing. Dealing with sponsorship, dealing with contracts, dealing with the owners, having to worry about maintaining your job. Maybe you get dropped by the owner, and now you got to get a job with another owner or hope someone picks you up. Things we used to see in older games. You don't see that now. And these are the things that are missing, and that's called presentation. This is why that might be the number one thing I talk about more than anything, because that's the biggest thing missing from these games. This is why it doesn't matter how many different series they add to the game. It's not going to have anywhere near the same effect as presentation. Pre-race, post-race, commentary. The announcers should be talking about the race. They should be talking about you. How you did the previous race. What place are you in the point standings? These things matter. And it's the type of things we see in other games that make those games deep and immersive. I still remember the first time when I played NBA 2K and I was the star of my own commercial. I didn't even expect that to happen. It was like the first time I was actually playing an NBA 2K game, and I was blown away by it. I'm like, oh my god, this is fucking awesome. And dealing with reporters after the game and answering questions. And you have different answers and options and way to answer these reporters. And depending how you answered, it affected you. It affected how, you're standing with fans, with the fan base, with management. Everything is linked. Everything you do actually has an effect, cause and effect in these games. And of course, there's the fact that you could scan your face into the game. And you're actually, when you're playing these games, you're looking at yourself in the game. It's one thing to just, fiddle around and come up with your own character model. That's fine. But to be able to scan your own image into the game and you're actually a part of the game, that's fucking awesome. And we've been seeing that for years now. With not just NBA 2K, but NBA Live by EA. So face scanning technology, it's been out there. How cool would it be to see your image in the game? And when you're in victory lane, celebrating, and it's you. Or during a pre-race or post-race interview. That's called presentation. The lack of a paint booth, lack of customization. Even now, with these bare bones car customization. There's only a handful of templates. There's not a lot of detail. And you're not even allowed to do multiple paint schemes. You should be able to do 3 or 4 paint schemes if you want. And then throughout the season, before each race, you pick the scheme you want to run. So you're not running the same scheme all year. Or you don't have to go in and redo your whole scheme. And even in career mode, you're kind of stuck with what you got. By the way, I'm going to throw something real quick out there that has nothing to do with what the subject I'm talking about right now. I got to throw something out there, man. I think I've been more than fair to 704, but they're guilty of false advertising. They've released like 1,000 fucking paint schemes. They never released any more templates to customize your car, which is something they clearly listed with that hot pass. So what happened to that? They released, it feels like 1,000 fucking paint schemes. And I give them credit, they do a good job with these paint schemes, but really, paint schemes don't do a lot to add to the game. Where are the custom templates that they promised? It was clearly part of the package. Nobody talks about it. Am I the only one that noticed that? How many people paid for this hot pass, got all these paint schemes, and they're sitting around wondering, where are these custom templates they told us we were going to get? That I could do a little more customization at least. Never happened, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's false advertisement. So I had to throw that out there. I just had to get that off my chest. That's not good for a company. So I don't know what happened with that. But this game is already really lacking in customization. There has to be some people that was looking forward to that. In either case, the lack of presentation in these games for me is the biggest thing. And if they don't really address that, this game's just still going to feel like it's missing something. By the way, presentation also includes, the things like statistics, a track map, caution replays. All of that is part of presentation. And yes, we are getting stats now. Finally, we've been getting them, but it's still an afterthought. It still pales in comparison to every other sports game in existence. And NASCAR games from way back, from several generations ago. There's a lot missing still with these stats, and they don't really tie well in with the rest of the game. How you tie everything together and flesh the game out, that's all presentation. So here's the one thing I wanted to just, as an example, right? I've talked about, again, the automatic crew chief, right? And this disconnect with players and coming up with your own setups. And really, that's a part of the world of NASCAR. These guys having, the race weekend involves practice, working on your setups, trying to get the car ready for race day. That's a big part of the sport of NASCAR. And in these games, again, afterthought. So you're left to your own devices. You just got to try to figure this shit out on your own, which is very confusing and difficult. Or you do what most of us do. We just go online and get a setup from somebody. There's no sense of accomplishment. So what I'd love to see, and this is part of, I guess, presentation. You ever watch practice on TV? And you see these drivers pull into the garage, and the first thing they do is pull out this touchscreen, and they put it, they're in the car, in the cockpit, and you see them fiddling around with it. And on that touchscreen, you'll see things like lap times, different cars, and they checking certain things. Well, what I would do, right, just as an example, I would have it where during practice, you pull into the garage, and now it shows you in cockpit mode with a touchscreen on laying against your steering wheel. So you see your hands, the touchscreen, and then on the side, on the driver's side, you see the crew chief standing there, and he's talking to you. You don't have to hear him, but through text on the touchscreen, you can answer questions. And there's a track map on that touchscreen. And you could go to sections of that track map, right? It's chopped up in sections. Let's say turn 3. And you click on that. And then you could pick from, different things. Like exit of turn 3, car is too tight. You click on a complaint. And then the crew chief will communicate with you and give you a solution. And say, okay, let's put a higher spring in the left rear, or change the right front shock and give it a different rebound. Whatever it is, I'm just throwing shit out there because I'm not an expert on this stuff. And you're communicating with the crew chief. He's helping you set up the car, but it's feedback from your complaints. You got the track map. You can go to different sections of the map, and you plug in your complaints. You got different options, and then you go back out, run a few laps, and you come back in and redo the process. And then you could see your lap times, right? If you get the car where it feels really good handling wise, but your lap times still aren't there, now you need more speed, the crew chief again can suggest certain things. How awesome would that be? And wouldn't you spend more time in practice? Wouldn't that make you feel more immersed in the career mode? Wouldn't that give you a bigger sense of accomplishment where you're not going online trying to just grab somebody's setup? And this is the disconnect that people who play these games in particular have. They don't know anything about these fucking how to set up a race car. And this would make the game deeper, more immersive, fun. I would love to spend practice doing that. Even have a testing, all kinds of stuff you can do with this. And as far as this crew chief that helps you with your setup, Project Cars 2 already does this. Now, it's very, bare bones. It doesn't go super deep with it, but man, it just shows you it's possible. These are the areas 704 needs to be focused on. And how cool is that? And you're sitting in your car in the garage, and you got the crew chief at the driver's window, and you guys are communicating. And you guys are coming up with setups because of your complaints and the crew chief's suggestions, and he's making these changes, and it's a learning experience as well. These are the things these games are missing. And that's also part of presentation. And it's the little details that matter. Nobody is going to really care if you add another series, but the game still has nothing going on in terms of presentation or what's happening between races. So, NASCAR Heat 4 is already on development. Or at least, even if they haven't actually started development, definitely the blueprint stage, the drawing board, where they're actually making up their mind on what they're going to work on, it's pretty much, I'm guessing, it's already a done deal, right? So, NASCAR Heat 4, I suppose it's going to be whatever it is. And I can only hope and cross my fingers that they will address some of these things I've been talking about for years, right? But being realistic, I'm probably at the very bottom when it comes to YouTubers, right? In the NASCAR community, right? So when you think of all these YouTubers who talk about NASCAR, who talk about NASCAR games, I would have to say I'm at the bottom, right? Definitely in terms of people who follow me or know who I am. I'm only bringing that up, not because I care about that, but because it explains why these guys maybe don't know what I'm talking about. Why would they? Nobody knows who I am, nobody, whatever. Except a few of you guys, which I do appreciate, but that's why I've asked people to forward these videos. I'm not really on social media outside of YouTube. I don't do Twitter or Facebook, so all the help I can get, I appreciate. But because I'm at the bottom, these things that I talk about doesn't really matter because They probably never heard of me, don't care, and even if they do pay attention to social media, they're more likely to look at guys with a big following. And I don't blame them, right? If you're gonna listen to people, it's probably gonna be people with a big following because you want that, uh, I guess, exposure with the subscriber base of these YouTubers. So that's why it's important that, uh, you know, I don't care if they take the baton. If any one of those guys likes what I'm talking about or agrees with my ideas, I don't care, man. Take it, run with it, take the baton. Anything that helps make these games better or gets the message to 704, I'm okay with it. I don't care. I just want a better game. So I do this with in the odd chance that somehow, some way, something gets through. But like I said, presentation is the biggest issue. I don't know if you guys agree or not. And it doesn't mean that these other aspects that I've talked about as well are not important. I'm just saying that you have to prioritize things. And in terms of prioritization, at the top of my list would be presentation. And that does include things like stats, paint booth, all that stuff. Everything that you see when you play this game that's presented to you, that's part of presentation. And that's the biggest problem. And if they could ever seriously focus on that and address that, I promise you would walk away really happy with the product. Yeah, there's always going to be these small details and areas of the game that still need work, and I expect them to work on that. But presentation is where it is, and that's why I talk so much about it, because it, to me, is one of the most, if not the most important thing that's been missing from NASCAR games. And now we're like 8 years in a row with a NASCAR game that you walk away from asking, why does this game still feel unfleshed out, unfinished, or kind of bare bones? And that's why. So before I close out this video, I'm going to throw one thing out there. And don't laugh. But just in case 704, on the odd chance that somebody that works there ever sees this video or any other of my videos, I'm going to throw a suggestion out there. You know how you invite some of these YouTubers out to play these games once you're close to finishing the game? And they've had Real Radman and Jeff Favignano out there. And that's great. That's a good idea. But I think it would be more beneficial to have some of these YouTubers come out when you are in the planning stages of the next game. Before you even start the actual work on the game. When you're on the drawing board and saying, okay, what are we going to focus on for the next game? I think that's when you need to have some of your consumer base involved. I'm not saying that you're going to invite some of these guys there and then you're just going to do whatever they tell you. That's not realistic. That's not what I'm saying. But just have them give some input and feedback. Maybe they can tell you what they think of the plans you're making and maybe offer some ideas. Now, as far as I go, like I said, nobody cares or knows who I am, so I don't expect them to ever invite me. But if you're going to invite these guys, invite a few of them as a group. And let's just say beyond NASCAR Heat 4, whatever the next game is after that, and I've talked about the next gen consoles are coming out, and you guys who follow this stuff, you're now starting to see that I knew what I was talking about. I've been telling you guys that within 2 years, the PlayStation 5's coming. And these guys have to prepare for that. So I'm talking about beyond NASCAR Heat 4. But at some point, when they sit down and they start going through their drawing board stage, have a couple of these guys come out for that. And be part of the meeting. And I'm offering, okay, don't laugh, I will be more than happy to be one of these people. I'll fly myself out. I'll pay my own hotel and flight. I'm not asking for a free ride or for freebies or a free trip. Nothing. I'll pay. I'll fly myself out. Not for a week, but like maybe two nights and a day. So whatever that day is, we'll have a big sit down. You know, and we can have a discussion. And I'd love to be a part of that. Not just me. Obviously, I'm saying get a group of guys, right? Jeff Faviano, Real Radman, uh, What If Racing. Now I don't know if how he feels about me throwing his name in there. I apologize, but maybe you might like to get invited out there. I'm just saying it'd be nice to have a group of YouTubers who really make up the fan base. Bring them out there and have them sit through one meeting, just one day, where you can have a presentation of what your plans are for the next game before you actually start, and then have us have input and say, hey, I like this. I'm not too crazy about that. And then we can have some input. And maybe we could tell you, hey, can you uh, maybe throw this in there? How about if you did this? I think it would help. I think that, you know, we know what we want from these games. And I think it's to your benefit to have a few of us guys out there and we can just have a dialogue. And then you decide if you heard anything that you thought you liked that you could make happen, and just say, hey, you know what? Maybe we can make this happen. These guys, this is what they want. At the end of the day, you want these games to sell. You want to give people what they want. You want them to be happy with the product. That's just an idea. Me personally, just speaking for myself, I'll pay my own hotel and flight. So if you aren't rolling on the floor laughing right now, think about it. I'd be willing to do it. But in either case, even if it's not me, ask some of these guys that you've already had out there. They have a way bigger following. People know who they are. And that, I think the rest of the consumer base they'd like that, because they feel like we have some representation who's having at least a meeting and putting this stuff out there. I've given these guys some credit. They do seem to listen at times with some things. They've surprised us at times. I gave them credit. They added the ability to simulate races, which a lot of people have been asking for. It wasn't out on day one. They added it afterwards through a patch. That was awesome. I appreciated that. That little feature added a lot to the game. And that's what I'm talking about. There are things that matter, that really have a bigger effect on the game. Where you don't have to run a specific race. Some tracks people don't like or don't want to have to race it. And you can just simulate it. So it's a simple feature. It should have been there from the beginning, but who cares? It's there now. So I appreciate that. But, anyway, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Those are my thoughts. I hope people, I wish I could do a video where I can actually edit it in cartoon form and show you what I'm talking about when I talk about my ideas, and you could visualize it by watching the video and actually see what I'm talking about. But I can't do it. I don't know how, and even if I did, I wouldn't have the time or the energy to do it. So I try my best to describe what I'm talking about. That's why these fucking videos are so long. And I do ramble a lot. I'm aware of that. But the reason that these videos are so long is because I really try my best to explain what I'm talking about so that you can visualize it. and then say, okay, I get it. I don't know how else to do it. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Presentation is the most important thing. Doesn't mean the other parts aren't important. I don't want people to say, well, this other stuff's important too. I know it's everything's important. Well, I'm just talking about in terms of priority. I think that's the biggest thing missing from these games. And as long as they don't address the lack of presentation and customization and things like that, if they don't address that, does it really matter how many fucking paint schemes they add? I mean, I'm not gonna say the only thing, but I would say 99% of everything they've done since they released NASCAR Heat 3 is paint schemes. I mean, it's like all of their effort is paint schemes. It, I don't want to harp too much on it or bash these guys, but it's that stuff doesn't really improve the product. You got to get I know they're trying to squeeze as much as they can from DLC because this is all they do as a company, so they're trying to maximize profits. But unless you give us a truly fully fleshed out game, you're gonna continue to lose people, and all the paint schemes in the world aren't gonna save you. So those are my thoughts. What do you guys think about everything I said about the presentation? What do you think about maybe the idea that I threw out there that they should have some of these YouTubers come out there, just have a meeting and talk about what their plans are for the next game, and then listening to some input. I think that would be a good thing. Those are just my thoughts. I look forward to your comments.